And we are live. JT here, and welcome to the huddle. The huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focus on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. Before we hit record, I was just sharing that through one of our recent partnerships with Football Ontario, our new partnership with one of the organizations that he's currently a leader in, it's really sparked some interesting conversation on opportunities to grow and where we can better support our student athletes, coaches, and leaders. My guest in the huddle today is currently serving as the Talk Today program lead. My guest in the huddle today is Alex Salomie. How are you today, brother?
Really good. Thanks for having me, JT. Really excited for this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get kicked off, pun intended, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings. For me, it's a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find those days where I'm most consistent, where I'm most intentional counting my blessings. I do find those days are filled with a little bit more joy, love, a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace. And I'm a big believer, biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So I just want to thank you again for blessing us with some of your time and energy here today, brother.
Oh, it's no problem at all. Really excited.
Okay. Okay. So I'm curious, one of the first things that we like to do in the huddle is to remind others and ourselves that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that would often say, we all have these things that make us unique and different. Our responsibility really is to celebrate them. So I'm curious, what's an interesting fact about you that maybe a lot of people don't know that you'd be open to sharing with our greater community today?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because like we were just talking about before the interview started about, I'm a big sports fan, big football fan, and I think a lot of people, even my work colleagues, see that. But one thing I think a lot of people don't know is I'm a big comic book and like sci-fi nerd and fan, so I'm
Yeah.
really into all that kind of stuff, like Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm not particular. I'm just a big fan of the sci-fi genre. So it's a fun thing that I like to tell folks, and it usually surprises them because I'm such like a sports guy, and all I do
Yeah.
is talk sports 90% of the time.
So I'm curious, the interesting thing is you're not the first person that's come from sport that also talks about, having an interest in sort of the sci-fi genre. I'm curious, is there something about that that really piques your curiosity or just, like really draws you in?
I mean, it's kind of similar to, how some people view sport as like sort of that escape, you can go be a fan. I think seeing some of these like fictional universes and how imaginative and creative people can be, it's something that I really enjoy about it, and the sort of surprises that come up and these storylines that can have such a deeper meaning, even in some cases that you wouldn't really usually think
Mhm.
hit home that hard. And it's something that I always find really interesting when I'm reading.
Mhm.
Even sometimes when I get into like fiction and stuff like that as well, it's always something that I find enjoyable.
It's interesting as you talk about that, and I wonder whether it comes back to sort of that mental muscle, like the imagination, right? Like, and it's something that we as kids, I just look at my kids, you just see any young child, they have a very active imagination. I just wonder, do you think it's part of that is it's just, wishing, hoping, just imagining things could be better, and part of that is probably something in our sometimes what can be a busy, distracted world. Sometimes it's just nice to think that, things can and will get better. I don't know. Curious your thoughts.
I mean, it's a little bit of that. I think it's. I mean, it's for me. It's a lot of entertainment. It's
Yeah.
just. It's. It's like I was kind of saying. Like it's those compelling stories. It's the character development. It's the deeper dives into people's backgrounds and
Yeah.
storylines and so on.
Okay.
Like it's. I just find it a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes it's nice to get out of that serious world when you throw on the news, you hear a lot of serious things going on in the world, and it's nice to just kind of picture a world where people can fly and teleport from one spot to another and do all that kind of that fun and silly sci-fi kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think back to one of the first conversations where we met, and when we were talking about this, laying the foundations for this potential partnership between Football Ontario and the Canadian Mental Health Association. And one of the things that really jumped out was you're like sport guy, you're a football guy. Like it felt like you could see kind of the smile come across your face. So it's obviously evident, like you were mentioning, sport has been an important part of your journey. Um, and as anyone that's been involved with sport knows, there's so many inherent life lessons that we learn, that we discover, that we're reminded of. I'm curious, what is an important life lesson that you've taken from sport that you find yourself still applying to other areas of your life today?
That's interesting. I think there's a lot of lessons that I've taken away from sport, and sport in general has had a huge impact in my life. Like I could probably, aside from the time my parents have spent with me and drilling me into and the importance of school and all that kind of stuff, but I think sports has really helped from that career development phase. And I think the hard work and the benefits of working hard that you can reap, the rewards you can reap from working hard in sport is something that I think has taught me a lot about sort of that character development where it's like work hard, pay your dues, and you'll get there.
Mhm.
That sort of reward for putting the time in and the effort in and focusing on bettering yourself, but also on having clear cut goals that you can achieve over
Mhm.
time and getting those goals. And as you get to that one goal, that next goal that comes up, and how are you going to achieve that, and how hard you have to work, and sort of instilling a lot of those ideals and beliefs in terms of how hard work can benefit you if you just put in the time and the effort.
Mm. I love the simplicity of what you share, right? Whether we call it like working hard, work ethic. And it's interesting because we live in an interesting time where we live in a social media driven world. And we sometimes see very often people's highlights. We sometimes don't see the proverbial reps and sets. They're done in the dark. We see everyone's highlight reel. We sometimes forget that how they got there is often, you know, we don't see that side of things. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? That, social media is great, but it's sort of easy to forget that there's a lot of behind the scenes reps and sets it takes to get there.
I think it's challenging.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's a lot of people who do put themselves out there and talk about, the work and the time they have to put in to get to the
Mhm.
point that they've gotten to. And I think it's important to always look back at that as well and not just see those highlights that like you're talking about.
Yeah.
You might see a 3-minute video on TikTok or on Instagram, but that 3-minute video may have taken hours to produce
Yeah.
and so much time to put in an effort planning and putting in all that work and editing and so on. So I think definitely there's something there where you're seeing the immediate benefit, you're seeing these immediate results,
Yeah.
but you don't see the time that goes into it. And I think tying it back to sort of the point where we were talking about with hard work and practice, I think that's something where you really see that growth through practice. And I think
Yeah.
that's where sports has always played a role too, because my first practice playing football, I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And then as you go through it, the repetition, the different drills and all the stuff, you become a better tackler. And so it kind of shows you how over time you develop these skills to be better.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, like as you talk about the idea of practice, right? Anyone that's been around sports knows that that's, something we talk about, right? Is practice. And it's interesting, like you shared that example, like whenever you take on something new, a new skill, if we're just talking sports, you know, most of us aren't very good at it. Like we kind of suck at it. And that's part of the process. But through, like you said, that those focus reps and sets, that practice, you slowly get a little better. The confidence grows, and all of a sudden, you just start to execute it at a higher level, right? And then the wins kind of come up, show up. Okay.
Yeah, and natural ability plays a big role in it
Yeah.
as well. But I think even based on my experience, I remember I remember my coach getting me to sign up for a speed camp to just train to run faster. And you think
Yeah.
it's kind of silly when you do it. And then after I think it was like I think we signed it. It was at York University. I think after like 4 weeks or 5 weeks, I
Yeah.
shaved like 6 or 7 tenths off of my time. I still wasn't very fast, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. I wasn't
Yeah.
running like a 4.240 or anything like that. My favorite comment was my coach making making a comment about how, I know you're faster, but you look even faster than you actually are.
Yeah.
Because it's all like form and things like that
Yeah.
that you don't normally think of when you see athletes working hard at their craft and playing in a game. All those little details about form and skill development, it takes time and it takes practice.
Absolutely. So, I was mentioning a few minutes ago that one of the things that, again, thinking back to when we first met, on a virtual meeting, and you could see your smile light up when you thought about, oh my goodness, I get to blend sport, football, this passion for, mental health and wellness. I'm curious, um, what inspired you to pursue this adventure being this program lead for the Talk Today program? Like what was the inspiration behind that?
Well, when I started at CMHA, my role wasn't specifically only focused on Talk Today. Talk Today was part of my work, but I did some communications work as well.
Mhm.
And over time, like I was able to transition into this full-time role focusing specifically on the Talk Today program. And I'd say a passion for sports is definitely one of the key things for me. I
Mhm.
love sports, whether it's hockey, baseball, football. During the Olympics, I love watching all the Olympic events and sports as well. It's that's a big part of it, but also hearing some of the stories and the impact that we were having as a program was something that I saw a lot of value in. And it's really kind of touching when you hear from somebody and they say, oh, you were able to help my son with X, or, thanks to your program, we were able to support somebody who needed it
Mhm.
at a certain point in their life. And when you start hearing a lot of those stories come up, and I start hearing from a lot of our colleagues who work with a lot of the teams that we support, it's just such a fulfilling feeling to know that you're making a difference and to see these examples of how you're making a difference. It's something that really kind of has kept me here because I just love this type of work, and I've really enjoyed the impact we've been able to have and the work we were able to do with a lot of folks in the sports world.
Mhm. And I appreciate you sharing. And like you said, it's those reminders, right, of the good work you're doing, right? Those success stories, those ones where a parent or a student athlete pulls you aside and just, hey, this really helped me when, right? Or this helped me do that. It's just a reminder that sometimes you got to stop and really celebrate those wins. Um, so I'm curious, one of the interesting things about this talk today, the more I've started to learn, the more as we start to work together to figuring out, how are we going to integrate this within our high performance program with our Team Ontario student athletes and coaches and leaders? Um, for people that maybe aren't as familiar with like Talk Today, like, you know, share a little bit about kind of, what it's all about, what the program's all about.
So when we started the program, we focused on three core components, education being one of the key elements to talk today. So what we said is, okay, we're going to provide mental health and suicide prevention education to athletes. And after that, so the idea here being, if they're learning more about it, it's also creating an environment where if all the players are participating, they're in the same room together, they're coming away with the same language when they walk away after this training, and they're also learning a lot about how to have a conversation with each other if they think somebody might be struggling, and what to look for if somebody might be struggling. It can be sometimes harder to recognize it in ourselves, but sometimes you will notice when, that teammate who's the first one into the gym and the last one out all of a sudden isn't showing up to workouts, or is showing up late and not really trying very hard, and you're sitting there going, well, something seems off about them. So giving them the skills and the tools to say, hey, I noticed something's up. Is there anything I can do? Do you want to talk about it? Giving them this ability to connect with each other. And also at the same time, breaking down that stigma that exists around mental health and that fear of talking about some of the challenges you're going. Sometimes it could just be a one-off thing, like somebody's having a bad day, because we all have bad days. So it's not always necessarily a case that somebody's struggling with their mental health because their behavior changes, but sometimes you'll notice consistent patterns.
Mhm.
So the first element was to educate players and give them some of these tools, how to recognize, how to respond, and how to connect them with somebody who can help. After that, we said, okay, well, if you're providing education to these athletes, um, it's hard to seek support after the fact. So we built the program to create local connections between our CMHA branches and the teams that participate in the Talk Today program. So the idea there is you have somebody within your community who you've met before who can help guide you to the services that you might need. So if you're looking for a specific support, maybe it's something that our branch can help you with. Maybe it's something one of our partners in the community can help you with. And it's to kind of help, especially youth athletes, it's to kind of hold their hand and help them through the process so they know how and where to access those supports when they need it. Of course, there are a lot of great resources out there when we're talking about crisis lines and so on. So when somebody is in immediate need, there are tons of services like 988, which is the suicide hotline that exists, and anybody can call or text in if they need support. There's a lot of other resources like that that are available in Ontario. Specifically, Connex Ontario is a great resource for connecting folks with services that are available. But at the same time, having that friendly face, somebody you may have met before that you can connect with, is sort of helpful in its own way. And it's also nice to have somebody outside of that team structure, especially when you're looking at higher performing athletes. And it's not to say that it's not a criticism on the folks on the team, because oftentimes they can be the most supportive people in the world, but there's still always sometimes that stigma that might drive people to wanting to seek support outside of that team structure.
Mhm.
So the idea there is, okay, now you know somebody within the community, you can access them confidentially, and they'll help guide you to the resources and supports available. So
Mhm.
that's sort of why we built in an education and a support component to the Talk Today program. And then the final piece is always raising awareness. Athletes have a tremendous platform in the community at various different levels, whether it's your local community rink where a lot of parents and families are gathering for games, or if it's a hockey game or a football game like an Argos game. They have this platform where they can share and openly help promote mental health and promote the work that we do locally. So fans can also get that benefit. And it's a mutually beneficial arrangement because, in a lot of ways, it helps promote the work that the teams are doing to support their athletes, but it also helps us in getting this message out to a demographic that has historically been very difficult for us to reach.
Mhm.
So it's a mutually beneficial partnership when we work with athletes and with sporting organizations to promote mental health in this way.
Mhm. I love the multi sort of prong approach, right? Like it's great to, help people make more aware, but then it's like, okay, no, there's support. You're not walking at this alone, right? And just that idea of like just sort of normalizing the conversation, that realizing, like you said, hey, we all have moments where we're happy, healthy, and well. We have other moments where we don't feel that same way, and that's okay. But just providing that space, it seems like really at the end of the day, it's really creating this culture where it's sort of just allowing people to acknowledge that there's ebbs and flows in life.
Yeah, that's just it. We all have good days and we all have bad days.
Mhm.
And the idea here is to look at them not just as athletes, but as individuals
Mhm.
and give them those tools. So when things do seem hard, let them know that there are supports there, there are things available for you. And I don't mean hard in the sense that like you're having a rough day, but hard when you just feel like you're in a funk and you need those additional supports,
Yeah.
making sure that people feel like they have those resources available and they know how to get it.
I'm curious from your perspective. I think of some of the leadership coaching I do, and one thing I often talk about with my clients is this idea, like at the end of the day, one of our greatest human needs is to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel appreciated. Do you think at the end of the day that partly through talk today, it's allowing people to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel appreciated?
That's certainly the goal.
Hmm.
Like we want to encourage openness, we want to encourage open conversations. We encourage coaches and staff to participate. When I look at some of our partnerships with the Ontario Hockey League, for example, we've trained a lot of billet parents as well. And so those around the players. And the idea is to create that, to your point, make people feel like they are seen and heard and create that comfortability where people can feel like, you know, I'm not just supported by my parents, but I have like a network here where if I wanted to reach out for support, there are people out there who want to help me.
Yeah.
And whether it's a coach who you trust and want to go to for support, or one of my colleagues at the CMHA, there's somebody there who wants to help,
Mhm.
and we're here to listen and hear what's going on with you. And I think that is a key piece to what we're trying to achieve here.
Awesome. I'm curious, as I was sharing with you before we went live, I was recently on a podcast where I was talking, and the guests, again, two emerging leaders, both have played, high level football, and we're asking about, this partnership. And you could see like these emerging leaders, like they really identified with that. I'm curious, Ontario Hockey League, Football Ontario, like, those are very, just they're intense sports. So do you at all find it interesting that some of these partnerships are in sports where traditionally are some of the most physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding sports, or was that very strategic as you build out this Talk Today program?
It's not so much strategic. I think, well, I mean, our origins are in the Ontario Hockey League. So
Yeah.
when we developed the program, we partnered with them to develop it, and they showed tremendous leadership throughout our development in terms of growing the program and so on. I think it's a lot of the time it's folks in leadership roles who are approaching us with an interest and passion in it. I think of Aaron and yourself when we hopped on that first call, and a lot of the passion you guys shared with us about wanting to educate more about mental health and help enhance the wellness of your players and the well-being of your players and working together to achieve these goals. I think the conversations are certainly shifting in a lot of
Okay.
cases. A lot of people are feeling more comfortable seeking support. Athletes in particular, you've seen a lot of high profile athletes who've come out and opened up about their mental health struggles. I think even when we're looking at the NFL, I think it was Hayden Hurst who had shared. Brendan Marshall has been very open about some of his challenges. So a lot of athletes are coming more and more. It's becoming more and more common to open up about your mental health, and I think that's being reflected in the shift to really want to put more of an emphasis on it because a lot of people used to associate mental health with mental toughness, and that's not you can be mentally tough and still have challenges with your mental health. And it's not to say that you're mentally weak by seeking support for that. And that's something that we try to drive home as well. If you broke your leg you would go to a doctor and try to get help and heal up and rehab your leg and get back on the field. It's kind of the same thing when we're talking about mental health. You know, if you're struggling with your mental health, it's okay and normal to seek support and get that support when you need it.
Mhm.
It's not a reflection of your ability, because we're seeing a ton of pro athletes who've won championships and achieved great things, and who've also been very open about their mental health challenges and the support that they've sought for it. So I think kind of shifting mindset has been a huge contributor,
Okay.
and then it's been great to see the amazing support we get from organizations like Football Ontario, and I always tell people I love working with sports folks, because it's very much, it's very direct, and how do we get things done, and everybody's very results driven, and you kind of jump into it,
Yeah.
and it's always easy to work with, because there's not a ton of pushback. It's just conversations and how do we make this work and what do we do.
Mhm.
And I look at our partnership, and how we're rolling it out with Team Ontario and educating coaches and the emphasis on educating coaches. I think it's a great way to kind of start getting that message out, and we're really excited to be working with such a great partner to do that.
Yeah. No, and it's, I mean, you can definitely feel your energy and your enthusiasm, your passion coming through for this work. And it's interesting if I just take a step back and look at our Team Ontario coaches, right? Very diverse range of just different life stages. But as we've presented this opportunity and we encourage them to, join us and as we walk alongside of it, they're like, it's great. Like, love what you're doing. So it's really interesting how, to me, that just shifts that conversation. Because I think back to maybe years ago, I'm not sure that conversation would have landed the same way. So I think it's kudos to people like yourself. They're doing the work, they're helping to educate and bring more awareness, normalizing the conversation.
No, I appreciate that, and the thing too is the care's always been there. Like, I think when you look at a lot of coaches that caring for play, it's always been transparent. There's a lot of amazing coaches,
Yeah.
and even team staff and so on at various different levels, that clearly care about the players and want to do more. And I think that's also part of what drives it as well. Because to do a lot of this work as a coach, especially when you think of a lot of the volunteers out there who aren't necessarily getting paid or benefiting financially from doing it,
Mhm.
it's a passion, and they care about these people. So I think the tie into mental health is just a natural fit too, because if you're already passionate and you already care about a lot of your players, making sure that they're also mentally healthy and doing mentally well, is another key aspect of it. And I think that's something that kind of really shows when you look at the environment that sports has created.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting idea. A couple points as you were sharing that was one, you think back to sports is actually a vehicle because it's one of those relationships. I mean, you're a sport guy. A great coach has that ability, right? To push you. They will be the first to, put their proverbial arm around you, but then also be the one to proverbially give you that kick in the arse when you need it. So it's kind of a different relationship. And I think we don't always have a lot of that, especially in our increasing uh, technology driven world. But I also do think it's like you said, the natural caringness, that willingness, especially in like a world like football, where 99% of our coaches, administrators, leaders are volunteers. So there's just that natural, like, I just want to give, I just want to help and support people. So great fit.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And to your point too, I've even taught, like, when we've had conversations with athletes, some of their favorite coaches are the ones that really got on them and
Yeah.
seemed really hard, but you knew it came from a place of caring. It's not about how hard they are on you, because they're doing it because they see that as a way to draw out your potential and to benefit you. They're not doing it maliciously. Not, and I mean, even when I look back at my time, right? Like, you get yelled at for dropping a pass that was an easy catch or whatever it might be, but I always knew that my coaches, at the end of the day, they actually cared. They wanted you to benefit it.
Yeah.
And even, like, having been able to stay in touch with a lot of my coaches over the years, it's one of those things where you see those relationships that have been built over time,
Mhm.
and that that doesn't just go away overnight. So these are caring people who want to do better for their players, and I think that's one of the valuable things too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious from your perspective, as you said, you mentioned a few minutes ago that the conversation's changing. I think we're in a time in our society where people are very aware of the conversation around mental health, of wellness, of the importance of it, right? What do you see as being kind of like the next evolution? Like people are more aware, I think of the days where, people are more open to sharing, both the triumphs, the struggles, how they've overcome. But what do you think is the next evolution in this sort of idea of mental health, of wellness? Where do you see this going?
That's an interesting question. I mean, certainly there's a strong shift in terms of wanting to provide support to players. I think it's also a shift in sort of the language that we use and how we've and a shift in how we do the things we do on a regular basis to kind of take into account a lot of the mental health needs that folks might have, whether it's, canceling a practice because, guys need a day off, or being a little bit more open to players taking time off when they're in a very stressful period during the school year, for example, or whatever it might be, right?
Mhm.
I think that that's a lot of what you start to kind of see as a shift, where that time off, that idea of taking care of players' mental health, taking care of it off the field, making sure players know that they're supported. It's hard to say where the next level would be. I think once we kind of achieve this ability to look at mental health the same way we do physical health, you start to see the benefits that can really grow from that.
Mhm. So do you think from what you're seeing as a leader in this space, are you starting to see that people are starting to realize that as human beings, we're not robots, right? Like if we are not, if our mental health isn't, where it could be, where we want it to be, then that's going to impact our physical, like our ability to produce physically and how we show up emotionally in our relationships. Do you think people are now starting to understand that, everything's sort of interconnected, spirit, mind, body?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways you are seeing a lot of that, and I think we see it we see it with a lot of even some of the emphasis on sports psychology as well.
Mhm.
Now the sports psychology aspect focuses very heavily on performance as well as mental health, and I think it's interesting to see that teams are starting to hire folks. Like when you look professionally, there's more folks hiring for positions and more education around it for players. I think it's certainly one of the key aspects to it. Like even, you know 50 years ago, it would have been inconceivable for a player to like miss a game because they were suffering from depression or anxiety, and
Mhm.
now it's becoming more open and more relaxed. Might not always be said, but it's something that is not as stigmatized, so it's breaking down those barriers for folks to seek support.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you talk about that. I was actually talking to a leader in our space who um, they had some players that came from outside this country, from the US, and they talked about, the players were asking about, sports psychologists on staff. And it's interesting how like they're asking that question, right? It wasn't necessarily about the weight room. It was about nutrition. It was about, other supports in place. I'm curious your perspective on this, that seems to be the conversation. Is I find it interesting because my background's in education. When people are in high school, they have a lot of caring adults around them. Might be their classroom teacher, might be their coach, might be a guidance counselor, might just be a social worker, might just being a caring adult. But then it's interesting how once they leave secondary school, whether they enter the world, apprenticeship, post-secondary, it's kind of like figure it out. So I guess my question to you is, do you think it's just showing this need for, we need caring adults. We need sort of like that student success teacher. We need sort of like a better, like, a version of a life coach, a spiritual advice, something like that, like just a caring adult. Kind of curious your perspective on that.
I mean, I think you don't necessarily lose those caring adults. I
Yeah.
think it's harder to maintain those relationships
Yeah.
in some cases. And I look at some of our partnerships. You've got in when we talk about, for example, the Ontario Hockey League, you've got guys moving away from home, staying with a strange family. So how do you kind of relate? How do you kind of get those build those that support network? And how do you help people build that support network? And even when you look at people who go into post-secondary, right? Like I went to university, I didn't know a ton of people,
Yeah.
but you start to make friends, you start to get to know people, and then as you start to build those relationships, you kind of start to develop that support network. Yes, your parents are back home, and you can always call them in some cases, but or you might have a mentor you might lean on. But I think yes, to your point, like it is helpful to have that caring person in your life and kind of nurturing those relationships. And I also think it's about, building that network around you as well.
Yeah.
Because it helps to have multiple people you could lean on when you're having a hard time.
Yeah. I what I really love about what you shared there, how you said it differs, right? Just changes the people, the caring adults in your life. But there's also this idea is like part of that is your responsibility to keep your eyes open to find that those network, those people that love and care about you. Like it's kind of a two-way street.
Well, and they're out there, right? Like there are people who care about you, and it's important to keep that in mind
Mhm.
and know who they are and nurture those relationships.
Yeah.
At least that's something I kind of view as how I've gone about things in my life. I've got friends and family that I could lean on when I'm having a hard time, and I think it's very similar for a lot of other folks as well.
Yeah. As you share that, I just wonder that sort of that analogy of when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? Whatever you. um, I'm curious. I want to be respectful of your time. Like we were talking about before we got on here, a lot of interesting conversations happening, especially in our space right now. People are reaching out to you, leaders that just open to different ways of supporting their athletes. I'm curious, if there's kind of like a coach, a leader, an administrator that's thinking about it, what would you say would be the benefit to starting to do this work, to integrating, something like Talk Today into their program, to enhance kind of like the great on-field work that they're doing or, film study? I'm kind of curious your perspective.
Well, and it's to a point you alluded to earlier, when you're taking care of your mind, you tend to see the benefits physically as well, right? Like when you're and it's also vice versa, right? Taking care of your physical body can also help support your mental health as well. Physical activity is a big part of that. So I think when you're kind of looking at it in that sort of cyclical, sort of entangled way, I think I think what I would tell folks is the benefits to supporting your athletes' mental health is not just that they'll make them better on the field, but it's also if they're taking care of their mental health, it can help benefit their happiness. It can help improve their mood. It can help do a lot of other things as well. And that's why I would suggest that, this is a benefit to them as a person. And yes, you'll also see the benefit. You could also see benefits on the field as well. So I think that's sort of the way we try to focus on it as well as, how can we help you as you? And, if part of you is wanting to play football, it can help you drive you, and it can hopefully help you better you in that area as well.
Nice. I'm curious if, like you said, a lot of these conversations are happening. We're going to have you in a couple of weeks, working with our men's and women's tackle teams. If anyone else is thinking about, wanting to kind of explore more about supports the CMHA have in place, Talk Today. Is there anywhere where people can follow and start to learn more and just kind of just explore um, what's out there? Yeah, is there anywhere where people can go?
Yeah, well, I mean, just generally for a lot of our information, you could always follow our social media accounts. So we're CMHA Ontario. And we also have our Talk Today website to learn more about the Talk Today program, some of our partnerships, some of the work that we've done, our partnership with Football Ontario. So you could check us out there at www.talktoday.ca. And yeah, there's also ways to get in contact us. Our contact information is there as well, so folks can fill out a form. Usually it comes to me anyways.
Yeah.
So I'll be able to respond, and we're always eager to see how we can help other folks if there's interest in our work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be sure to share out those handles, the website in the description, either on YouTube or on the podcast. Um, Alex, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for, you know, the great man you are, you know, the work you're doing in this space that you're leading, you know, the guide, um, but really more importantly, the amazing human being you are. You know, as I've said numerous times, one of the things when I remember when we first connected on that first sort of like exploration call was just when you found out this was like football, you could see your eyes and your smile kind of light up. You're like, this is awesome. I'm a sports guy. So just want to thank you for importantly doing this work, but then two, also showing us of the benefits of how this work can actually impact other areas of your life, sport being one of them. So just want to thank you for sharing your energy and enthusiasm with the world, brother.
Thank you, and thank you so much for everything you've done. Like I said, it's been so great to work with you, and we really appreciate all the support we've been getting from Football Ontario, and we're excited to see where this partnership leads and how we can continue to promote mental health with your members across the province.
Absolutely. So, folks, Alex dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's the consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually helps you create greater results in your life. So, my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, or just someone you think that would benefit from listening to these positive, inspiring, and empowering ideas. The more people we have listening, understanding, and applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, everyone.